Well, good morning and welcome to Dairy Council of Arizona and Nevada's virtual farm tour of Kerr Family Dairy. My name is Terry and I'm with the Dairy Council of Arizona, and I'm so happy you're joining us today. You're going to get a first-hand look at an Arizona dairy farm, and you'll be able to see the great care that they provide to their cows and the land, and then how that translates into the delicious milk and dairy products that you enjoy every day. We want to make sure that you know you're welcome to share your experiences on your social media channels, and you can use the hashtags farm to table, undeniably dairy, or agriculture, and you can tag Arizona milk producers or Nevada milk to tag us in your social media posts. So before we get started, let's cover a few housekeeping items. We have folks joining us this morning on YouTube, on Zoom, and on Facebook Live today, and you'll have the opportunity to have your questions answered live. For those of you on Zoom, you'll notice that the chat window isn't active. However, we are accepting comments and questions via the Q&A box throughout today's tour. So just click that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen anytime to send us questions. There will also be a couple of poll questions that will pop up on your screen, and you can click on the poll and submit your responses, so watch for those. For those of you on Facebook, please put your comments and questions in the live chat. My colleague, Jen McCune, will let us know your questions, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. The poll questions will pop up on the screen today for you to click to provide your responses through Facebook as well. And YouTube viewers, you also have access to the live chat on the right side of your screen to send us your questions, and my colleague, Pat Johnson, will forward them on to us. Your poll questions will be screen shared and displayed via video, so you can type your responses into the live chat box. I do want to mention one note about using chats and comments. We want to engage with you as much as possible and share your questions with our guests today. We ask that you please limit your live chat to questions and comments related to today's tour. We're monitoring and moderating the live chats, and if we find that the chat is being used incorrectly, comments and users just might be removed from that chat window. All of you that are registered for today's tour will receive a quick post-tour survey via email. Those of you in Zoom will have this survey pop up in your browser when we've concluded today's tour. And if you can take a quick moment to complete the survey, it will help us to evaluate and improve our program, and we'd greatly appreciate it. And one last note, this tour is targeted at registered dietitians, nutrition and diet technicians registered, and other health professionals. So please feel free to ask any nutrition questions that you may have. You'll receive a certificate for 1 credit hour of continuing professional education that you can use for your portfolio. And the link to download the certificate will pop up after you complete the survey. So why are we doing a virtual tour? First of all, when I say the word farmer, there are some images that come to mind. And these are the things that a lot of people think about. And that's because most people have a very nostalgic concept of farmers and farming. Less than 2% of Americans are involved in producing food to feed the rest of the US and the world. In reality, farmers today have to be in the know about all aspects of business, including financing, management, planning, machinery, technology, and all aspects of agriculture, including things like soil health, weather, animal welfare, nutrition, a whole variety of different things that they need to know about. But when I say dairy farmers, these are typical images that come up for most people. Again, this is a very nostalgic view. In reality, modern dairies take advantage of modern technology, just like every other business. So these are some pictures of modern Arizona dairy farms. But large does not equal factory farms. Here in the Southwest, farmers are able to take advantage of the available land and the great climate, and they can expand because of these features. But what about the heat? It does get hot here. And how do cows handle the heat? You can see that most dairy farms have misters and fans that help keep their cows cool. And you'll see today how farmers work to keep those temperatures comfortable so that the cows are happy, healthy, and they produce the most milk. So let's start with a poll question. What percent of Arizona and Nevada dairy farms are family owned and operated? So if you're on Zoom or Facebook, you can answer the poll right through your app. If you're watching on YouTube, you can put your response in the chat. And as we're waiting for everyone to answer the poll question, let me take a minute to make sure that you know that Dairy Council of Arizona and Nevada provides free nutrition education materials that you can use with your patients, your clients, and your students. And you can visit either arizonamilk.org or nevadamilk.com for more details. And we're able to provide these resources to you at no charge because dairy farmers in Arizona and Nevada value nutrition education. And they support us to be able to bring these resources to you to help you do your job more easily and efficiently. So let's take a look at the results of the poll. You can see that 42% of our Zoom viewers thought that the answer was 98% of dairy farms, and that is the correct answer. 98% of dairy farms in Arizona and Nevada are family owned and operated. And we're going to meet one of those families right now. So let's get on with the tour. We are very excited to be joined by Wes Kerr of Kerr Family Dairy in Buckeye, Arizona, and he's looking forward to telling you all about his dairy farm. So Wes, why don't I turn it over to you?
Okay, thank you, Terry. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you could all join us today virtually on the tour. My hope is that one day all of you could make it out to have a live tour because that would be fantastic. So my name is Wes Kerr. I'm a fourth generation Arizona dairy farmer. My wife, Lauren Kerr, is actually our camera woman for the day, and she as well is a fourth generation Arizona dairy farmer. So my great-grandfather started dairy farming in Michigan in 1927. And then he got tired of the cold winters and ended up moving to Arizona. So pretty much the exact opposite weather of Michigan. And we've been here ever since. Our current location was built in 1990. And my wife and I live here on the farm with our 3 children. And so we really enjoy getting to share the farm with lots of different people. It's a way of life for us. And it's something that we always want to share. So we want people to ask questions and know why we do the things that we do on our farm. Everything that we do is for a specific reason, whether it's an economic reason or a nutritional reason or an animal health reason. We work with lots of professionals to make plans on how to manage our farm. So we have a dairy nutritionist who comes out once a month, and he will look at the rations of the cows and he will balance the rations. He will adjust the rations accordingly, depending on lots of different variables. And at the end of our tour, we will actually end up in our feeding area. And so we'll really get to focus on the nutritional part. Our veterinarian, he comes out every 2 weeks and he does vet checks on the cows. He does a preg check to see if the pregnancies are going along well. And he'll do an overall health check of our animals. And so our veterinarian and our nutritionist work closely together to make plans for our farm that we implement. Today I'm standing here in our fresh cow pen, and our fresh cows are cows that have just recently calved. So when a cow is actively calving, we would say that cow is freshening. And so this is a very important stage for dairy cows. That's when they transition from being a dry cow where they're not being milked and they're pregnant to having their calf and starting to give milk. So their bodies are changing, are ramping up. Their body is telling them, hey, we need to produce milk now. And so they actually get moved to a different pen once they have their calf. And they also get on a different diet, a different ration. So we have 4 different rations that we feed on our farm as our cows move around the dairy. All of these cows that you see here have had their calf within the last 2 weeks. And we like to keep these cows really close to the middle of our farm so that we can keep a very close eye on them. The first 2 weeks after they have calved is the most stressful point in their life and in their lactation cycle, because their body has just pushed out a 70 to 90 pound calf. And so they are not only recovering from the delivery process, but their bodies now, their metabolism has kicked into gear and is converting all of their feed that they're eating into dairy products. So we like to keep them up close to where we can keep an eye on them every single day. We're looking over them, making sure that they're happy and healthy. You can see one cow here is chewing her cud, and that is a very good sign that cows are comfortable and happy. A stressed out cow will not chew her cud. And so that's one of the very first signs that you can see if you have a cow that might be getting sick. She will stop chewing her cud. So you immediately need to check that cow out. So every 6 to 7 minutes, it's normal for a cow to regurgitate her food, chew on it for another 5 minutes, swallow it again, and maybe a few minutes later regurgitate it and chew on and ruminate. And so that is a very important thing. And so anytime you see cows chewing their cud, a lot of times they'll have their eyes closed, taking a nap. Those cows are in a happy, healthy state. So if anyone were to say, oh, that cow, she doesn't look happy, she looks sick or something, and you could see that she was actively chewing her cud, you would say, no, that's a perfect sign of good health. So all of these cows here are just off to the races and getting ready to start their lactation. Their lactation, on average, lasts for about 305 days. So every cow should have a baby once a year, ideally. And that's actually the same that cows in the wild would have, a baby once a year. Now, today, there are no wild cows. The ancestor of our modern cows was called an Auruk, and they went extinct in the early 1600s or so. Of course, over thousands of years, humans have domesticated cows into two distinct classes, if you will, or we have the beef side, which many different beef breeds who were bred specifically for beef production. So they don't give as much milk because their bodies have been bred to put on fat, put on meat, put on muscle, and not put that energy towards milk. And then of course here today we're at a dairy farm, so our cows have been bred over generations to give lots of milk. On our farm we have several different breeds of cows. The most common cow in the United States is the black and white Holstein cow. They give lots of milk. They give the most milk of any breed of cow in the world, actually. The only drawback is that their components, which is the fat and the protein percent in the milk, is lower than the other breeds. So we don't get paid a premium quite as often for Holstein milk. However, they are the backbone of the dairy industry in the United States. We also have crossbred cows, Jersey crosses, which Jerseys are a smaller type of a cow. They're typically a solid color cow and usually are a brown or fawn colored cow. You can see these cows here, these two black cows, they're actually a Holstein Jersey cross. And so the black is a dominant trait from the Holstein breed, and the solid coat color is a dominant trait from the Jersey breed. And so many times when you breed a Holstein and a Jersey, they will come out as a solid black color. Now the Jersey, it gives very good components. It gives very high butter fat, very high protein, but not quite as much volume. When you cross the two breeds, you tend to get a really good combination of all of the good qualities of the two breeds. And so on our farm, we are embracing crossbreeding. In our local market is full, if you would say, of milk. There's not a whole lot of extra growth happening. And so the best way going forward to bring more value to our customers in our market is to have high component milk. So the more cheese and other dairy products that you can make from each pound of milk is more beneficial. And so we actually, as dairy farmers, will be paid a bonus for those extra components of the fat and the protein. We also have a third breed, which we are using, and it is a brown Swiss. And actually, there's one walking up to us now. That's a brown Swiss cross. Brown Swiss have a very high protein content in their milk and a very moderate fat. And consumers today are looking for high protein, moderate fat dairy products. And so that is the third breed that we have incorporated into our breeding program. We're going to go ahead and stick with our three breeds at this point. We're not going to go with one or the other because they all have strengths and weaknesses. So these cows are going to make a big loop on our farm. Basically, they'll move to the next pin down, and then every month or so get moved. They'll get graduated down to the next pin depending on their lactation cycle. So we manage them according to their days in milk. Once they are 60 days in milk, that is when they will start to be bred again. And so on the cows on the other side of the dairy, maybe right now we won't be able to see it, but as we move around the farm later, you might get to notice this orange cow chalk on the tailhead of the cows. And that is how we determine when the cows are in heat, when they're in their estrus cycle. A cow comes in heat every 21 days. And a good conception rate would be around 30%. So ideally, we would like our cows to conceive between 80 and 100 days after they've calved. But if we're only getting a 30% conception rate, then we try to get one cycle that's a little bit before ideal, another cycle at ideal, and then the third cycle would be a little bit past ideal, so that our average will be between that 80 to 100 days in milk conception rate. And then they will milk until they're about 7 months pregnant, and then we will dry the cow off. That means that we will stop milking her. We will move her to a different pen. She'll get a different ration. She actually, at that point, gets a pedicure where we trim her hooves. We vaccinate the cow. And she gets to start a 2-month vacation period where she basically just relaxes and eats and grows her baby inside until she freshens, of course, calves. So at this point, what we're going to do, we're going to head over to the milking parlor. And I don't know if there's any questions yet, or if
yes, there are a couple of questions.
Okay. Let's do the questions.
So one question that came in is, what if the cows are sick? Do they still get milked when they're sick?
Very good question. I'm glad they asked that question. So yes, if cows get sick, typically we will keep milking them. So it depends on what condition they have. Most of the time, our cows are actually giving large volumes of milk. At the peak of their lactation cycle, they're giving close to 150 pounds of milk a day, each and every day. So if a cow gets sick, they will typically drop in production, but will still be producing a large amount overall of milk. And so we will milk them. Usually it will be a little bit less. So most of our cows are milked 3 times a day. The ones at the end of their lactation are milked only twice a day because they're not giving quite as much milk at that time. To be honest, we keep our cows pretty healthy, and so sick cows are pretty rare, but we will isolate the cow and treat her as needed for a few days until she's recovered, and then move her back in to the milking pen. But on our farm, we really focus on prevention and early diagnosis of treatment and of an illness so that we can treat it pretty quickly. 95% of the time, they get sick within the first 2 weeks, and we can treat that with just electrolytes, oral electrolytes. It's basically a powdered mix, like you could think of a Gatorade or a Powerade, but made specifically for our cows. It has a neat name called Cowerade. And so we will fill up a 5-gallon bucket of water, add these scoops of the powder. We'll add some propylene glycol as an energy source for the cows, and we will drench the cow is what it's called. We'll stick a hose into her mouth and pump that 5 gallons worth of electrolytes into her. Those cows 95% of the time recover with just that treatment alone. Of the 5% that don't recover from that, we can put them on an antibiotics course if it is a uterine infection, which typically is the most common infection after calving. And that course is a 5-day course. But something really interesting about the antibiotic that we use, it's called Exenel, and it does not cross the udder barrier. So there is a barrier between the cow and her milk. And old types of antibiotics, you can think of penicillins. Those types of antibiotics, actually, if you gave penicillin to a cow, it would show up in her milk, and one cow out of 1,000 is enough to trip the test in our milk at the milk truck whenever he takes the samples of the milk before he goes to the plant. And so penicillin would be something we would not be able to use, but Exenel, because it does not cross that barrier, that's something we can give to the cow, and her milk is actually still safe to consume and test negative for antibiotics. It is an expensive antibiotic. It's a new antibiotic, well, not real new, it's probably 5 or 6 years old. And so it's a really great thing that we can use, but to be honest, it's even far less than 5%. It's closer to 1% on our farm of cows that would need to get on Exenel and that sort of treatment. So,
and we do have a couple other questions, Wes. One is, how many cows are on your farm, and then how long do the cows carry their calves? How long is their pregnancy?
Okay, great question. So right now we're milking about 1,150 cows a day, and then we have about 200 dry cows. And that might sound like a lot, but for Arizona, we're actually a very small farm. But compared to other parts of the country, that we're a big farm. So it just kind of is interesting. It depends on where I am, if I'm kind of considered on the big side or the small side. If it's local, I'm kind of the small guy. If I'm somewhere out of state, usually I'm a large dairy farmer. The gestation period of a dairy cow is 9 months, so about 280 days, 283 days, give or take. The different breeds actually will alternate, will be different by about 3 days. So I think they say a Jersey and a Holstein will calve about 280 days, and then the Brown Swiss would calve at like 283 days or so on average.
And another question from Brittany: what do you do with the cows that cannot produce any milk any longer?
Great question. So at the end of their lactation cycle, if they are not pregnant, then those cows will go to beef. So the goal on our farm is to have 0 cows die on our farm. If a cow dies on our farm, that means some sort of tragedy happened to her. She could have slipped and fallen. She could have got some sort of injury. Maybe she got sick quickly and we were not able to catch her in time and treat her in time, and she died on our farm. We want to keep, the goal is 0. And we want every cow to live a long, healthy life on our farm. And at the end of that long, healthy life, we want her to go to beef. So that is the ultimate goal. Keep them healthy and productive until the end, and then go to beef.
Okay, so our next stop is the milking parlor. Thanks so much for answering all those questions, Wes.
Yes.
We did have a few connection issues at the milking parlor. So as Wes is heading over there, we'll show a short video of the milking process, and then Wes will be back live to talk more about it.
Here we are in the milking parlor. Right now we're adding disinfectant to the cow's udders. These cows have already been milked, so the machines have automatically popped off because they have sensed that the cow is done. We put disinfectant on before and after we milk the cows, just to keep them nice and clean as they exit the barn. These cows here are still being milked. On average, it takes about 8 minutes to milk a cow, depending on how much milk she is giving. These cows now are leaving on this side. This is called a rapid exit. The stalls lift up, and so the cows can leave and get back out to the corral where they can go eat and drink and rest. And the next group of cows will start to come in a minute. So here's the next group of cows coming in. So they're getting the disinfectant sprayed on them.
Well, those were the videos, and we can head back to Wes and see what else he has to tell us about the milking process.
Okay, so yeah, I am applying the disinfectant as you saw in the videos. Actually, we're using a new formula now, which has a quicker kill. So it takes about 10 seconds for bacteria to be killed on the udder. And then there are some conditioners in the formula of the disinfectant as well to help keep the udder in a good, it's almost like a lotion type of a deal, if you will, keep the udder, prevent the udder from becoming chapped. And it will stay on the udder a longer time as she leaves. We used to use iodine, and iodine is a very good disinfectant, but it doesn't have a quick kill. It takes about a minute for iodine to kill bacteria. And it doesn't, by itself, it doesn't stick onto the udder quite as long as this new formula of disinfectant. So we are really excited about this new formula. We've been using it, well, for about a year now. And we can see that our somatic cell count score is actually very, very low. Right now, our monthly average is about 95,000. And we get paid a bonus by our co-op if our somatic cell count score is below 175. So the milk quality that our cows are producing is phenomenal. And the better milk quality you have longer shelf lives of the dairy products, and you have a larger array of dairy products that you can produce. So there are several different types of cheeses that are very sort of finicky. They're difficult to make, and you need high quality milk to produce that. So we're going to try to head on over here to the to our tank room. The body temperature of a cow is 101 degrees, and so the milk that comes out of the cow is pretty hot. But this plate cooler cools the milk from 100 degrees down to below 37 degrees. So our milk cannot be picked up if it is above 37 degrees. So our goal would be somewhere around 34 or 35 degrees to help keep the milk clean and cool. We have two tanks, two floor tanks. Each one holds about 3,000 gallons of milk, and our silo holds about 7,000 gallons of milk. Right now, we're shipping about 75,000 pounds of milk a day, and a gallon of milk weighs about 8.67 pounds. Here is where the milk truck will come and hook up to this arm to pump the milk out. But the very first thing he does is he takes a temperature of the milk. If it's above 37 degrees, I get a phone call. Even if it's 38.1, I get a phone call that says my milk is hot and can't be shipped. And so we have to cool that milk down. So that's why it's very important to have all of our machinery working very well. So once the milk truck driver says that the milk is cold, he will take samples of the milk. Those samples go on an Igloo ice chest right next to the seat. So anytime you see a milk truck driving down the freeway, there's an Igloo ice chest right next to him that has the samples. When he gets to the milk plant, he takes those samples and delivers them to the lab. The lab has to run their tests on all of those samples, and every test has to be clean and clear. Otherwise, the milk is dumped at our own expense. So once the testing is done at the lab, at the plant, then he can offload the milk. So that truck has to wait until the milk is cleared. We can move over to our calves. These here are our older calves. They're already weaned now. Our calves will be on milk for about 70 days before they get weaned and go to a hay and grain diet. It's really important for calves to start on roughage, so the alfalfa hay that we're feeding them right now, combined with the grain mix. This grain mix is designed specifically for our cows. So our nutritionist has sent bids off to some of the feed companies, and those feed companies then will compete for our business, but they need to make sure that the specs meet our requirements for quality and all of the different nutrients that our nutritionist has wanted. So a baby calf will actually not develop their rumen. That's the chambers in their stomach that makes cows so advantageous to humans that they can consume all of this roughage, all of these cellulosic plants that humans cannot digest. It's because of the rumen that they're able to do this. That rumen will not develop if it does not exposed to hay and grain. And so that's why at 70 days, it's very important to let these calves get exposed to that roughage. So, and we'll head on over to the calf barn now and take a look at the calves that are still on milk. They get grain in the calf barn as well, and water and milk. And so at 70 days is when we add the alfalfa hay to their diet. So do we have any
Wes,
questions at this point?
Yep, we do have a couple of questions about the calves. One is, from Kay, she assumes the girl calves that are born become dairy cows, but what do you do with the boy calves?
Yeah, very good question. So the bull calves get sold as day-old bull calves, and they get raised on feedlots and to become beef. The majority of the beef produced in Arizona actually comes from dairy beef, so they would be bull calves from dairy farms.
And another question is, do the calves, this is from Joni, do the calves actually nurse, or how do they get their milk?
Good question. So for the first, actually, I'm going to stay right here for a second. So for the first 24 hours, we will let the calf nurse from the cow to get the colostrum. After the 24 hours, though, we will move them into the calf barn to get milk from our calf feeder. It's very important to not let the cow and calf stay together for a very long time. If they stay together for a long time, then they develop a bond, and it's more stressful when you do separate them. It's more stressful for both the cow and the calf. So there have been some areas that have tried to keep the cow and calf together longer, but all of the data really shows that that's not the best thing for both of those animals. So after the first 24 hours, they get moved in to the calf barn and receive fresh milk from our calf feeder.
And also, how many calves do you have on the farm?
Yeah, good question. So they're constantly being born every day. So I'd have to look at the computer system to tell you exactly how many calves we have this morning in our calf barn. I know we did have only one heifer calf born today. We're actually entering into our low calving season. It's kind of backwards of what a lot of people think. They think, oh, springtime, that's when all the animals are having babies and all this sort of stuff. Well, for dairy cows in Arizona, the springtime is the least amount of calves being born. And that has to do with our really hot summers. Even though we have our fans and our misters going 24/7 at times, if it's that hot, they don't shut off. The cows still are under heat stress, and it's difficult for a cow to conceive in that condition when she has heat stress. So that's why the calves born this time of year, there's not very many of them, and they actually were conceived during the summer months. So when we walk, I'm in the calf barn now, but we're going to head on in. The calves have already had their breakfast feeding and are taking their morning nap. So when we walk in, we're going to see them all kind of laying down, taking a nap, and me talking and my wife here with me. It's going to kind of excite the calves. They'll all start getting up. But if you ever walk into a calf barn, one of the first things you should look for is calves that are laying down. Once they've eaten, they should be taking a nap. Calves that are sick or not feeling well, they'll actually be standing up and kind of hunched over. So that's another sign that we look at whenever we are taking care of our calves. They're all in individual hutches as well. One of the first signs that a calf is not doing well is that they'll stop eating and drinking. And so we need them individually housed so that we can monitor the feed and the milk in their buckets and then monitor their individual bottles that they are being fed. So that is why they are all in individual hutches for the first 70 days. And then they graduate to the larger corrals that you just saw a little bit ago. So let's go inside and take a look at the calves having their morning nap. So,
Wes, there's another question on here that maybe you can answer as you are walking through the calf barn. And that is, did you always want to take over this business, or did you have another career that you wanted to pursue?
Very good question. So as a little kid, I always thought that farming was so cool. I always wanted to be a dairy farmer, and I kept that passion with me all the way up until about college or so. And then I'm like, well, there's a big world out there. Maybe there's something else I could try. Um, and so I thought, about doing other things. But then, once I graduated, um, I realized what a neat life it is here on the farm. And so I came back to the farm and started managing it in 2005 whenever I graduated from college. So I've been here ever since, and I'm really happy with the choice that I've made. It's a good place to raise a family. I don't have a commute to work because I kind of live here, and that makes it really nice. And it's a unique job as well. There's not very many dairy farmers, and so it's kind of fun to be able to tell people that what you do and share with them all the things that we do. So,
And a couple of more questions to go along with that. What is your degree in, and how many dairy farmers are there in Arizona?
okay, very good question. So there are only about 40 families in Arizona who are dairy farmers. Some of those families have a couple of dairies. And so I think there is around 70 farms total, but run by 40 families. And actually, the last number, I think we're about 39 families now. So the dairy industry is actually consolidating. And so we're going to see dairy farms sell out over time, and a lot of it has to do with just economic factors. So to margins are very, very slim for dairy farms, and so you actually do need economies of scale to be able to turn a profit. And to be honest, it is a job that you have to love because it is 24/7. I am on call 24/7, and that is not for everyone, and you really do have to love what you do, otherwise you would get burned out. And so I totally understand that a lot of my peers and a lot of the younger generation say, you know what, maybe I don't need to be a dairy farmer, maybe I can go do something else with my life. And so that's what we're seeing happening over time, fewer and fewer dairies. So I expect there to be 35 families left in the next couple of years. I do know in the next month or two, well, like actually in mid-May, I haven't heard the exact date, there's going to be a farm in Arizona going up for auction. And it was the same thing. He had several kids, and none of them were interested in dairy farming. They all like the farm, but none of them want to run the farm. There's a lot of things you have to really keep going. So my degree was actually in theology. So I always had a mind for other parts of the world, and thought it would be really cool to combine a theology degree with my knowledge of farming. And but once I graduated college, I was like, you know what, there is a need here. My mom and dad said, you know what, we do have a position for you if it is something that you guys want to do. So I ended up getting married and settling down and having kids here. But I have traveled extensively, and I always think in my mind, when I grow up, maybe I'll go and do some more traveling and try to help other parts of the world develop their agriculture. So.
And another question along that line from Kay at Lehigh Elementary, and these are her second graders that are asking this. Did your wife always want to be a dairy farmer too?
Yes, my wife did always want to be a dairy farmer, and so it's kind of neat. We grew up a few miles down the road. She was actually a good friend of my sister in childhood, and after college is over, it's like, oh hey, I remember you. So that's and the rest is history, as they say. But yes, she loved growing up on a dairy farm, is really happy that our kids get to also grow up on a dairy farm. Her family actually dairied, they had registered Holsteins. And so their farm was well known for the really good Holstein genetics that they had. Registration today is kind of a different thing. We're able to genetically test cows today by the hair that we can pull off. We can send those hair samples off to the laboratories, and they'll be able to tell us the genetic makeup of the cow and the quality of the cow, how much milk they should give, whether the components, the fat and protein. And so registered dairies today are not as common as they used to be. And we are not a registered dairy, especially with as much crossbreeding as we do. That's just not what we are. However, something interesting, to switch the subject just for a second, is we are breeding for naturally hornless cows. The vast majority of Holstein and Jersey cows are born and will grow horns in their life. there is a very rare genetic trait that we are breeding on our farm for naturally hornless calves, and it's called a polled gene. And the reason it's called polled is because on the anatomy chart of a cow, if you were to look one up, the top of the head, like kind of the forehead, where the I guess the sides of the head where the horns would grow, is called the poll. And so most of our calves are polled. Now, some of them, a small percentage of them, do have horns. And so what we do at a young age, it's actually their first day. Once they've spent 24 hours with the cow, then we move them into the calf barn. At that time, we will put lidocaine, the same lidocaine that dentists would use if they were going to drill a tooth. We put lidocaine around the horn bud, and we put a caustic paste on that horn bud. And so it's about the size of a dime or so. And that paste will eat the horn bud and prevent it from growing. And it's a much better way than back in the olden days. They used to wait for the horn bud to rupture, almost like a tooth, a baby's tooth, before it ruptures through. Once that horn would rupture through, they would cut it off and need to cauterize it. But today, with our lidocaine and our paste, we don't have to do that. And of course, on my farm, it's very rare because of this genetic trait that we are breeding for. So it's a dominant trait, and so that makes it much easier to get into your herd. If it was a recessive trait, it would take an extra generation or two to really start making headway into your herd. But thankfully, with that dominant trait, you can go from 0 to 100%, well, or close to 100%, depending on which bulls you use in that first generation.
So Wes, we do have a couple of questions about the feeding of cows.
Yes.
So as you head over towards the commodity barn, does everybody know that dairy cows have their own nutritionist? So we are going to show a couple of videos about cow feeding, and then once the videos are done, we'll come back live to Wes for him to talk more about that.
So here in my hand, I have almond hulls. This is a byproduct, of course, of almonds. A lot of people don't realize that dairy cows in particular, but even other farm animals, consume lots of byproducts that would otherwise go to waste. So this is one of them. By us being able to feed our cows almond hulls, this helps make the almond industry more sustainable as well, because they're having less waste as a byproduct. We also can feed our cows soy hull pellets. In parts of citrus growing areas of the country, especially in Florida, they feed citrus pulp. In Hershey, Pennsylvania, the dairies are in that area, they will feed culled chocolate too. So lots of different processes have byproducts, and we can feed many of those byproducts to the cows. So right now he's adding the hay to the ration, and you can see he's like gently putting it in. It's because as he's adding it, he's watching the scale. And so look, he's looking at the scale, he's waiting for the scale to stop moving so he knows exactly how many pounds of the hay that he has put in, and that is ryegrass hay that he's putting in right now. I believe next he will be getting alfalfa hay, but I could be wrong. Depends on which ration and which group he's feeding. So you can see behind the tractor there are silage piles. We basically can cut the entire crop and chop it up into small pieces and pile it. The reason we have the white plastic with the tires is to help the fermentation process. We add cultures and enzymes to the feed as we're chopping it in the field. The chopper is constantly adding the live cultures into the feed so that it can do the fermentation process. It looks like he's adding some premix right now, which is a combination of vitamins and minerals. We actually use on our silages, we use two different types of plastic. We use a blue underlayer plastic and a black and white plastic, and that is to get out any extra oxygen. Oxygen is the enemy of fermentation. And so we do everything we can to try to keep the oxygen out. That's why the silage is packed with a large packer tractor to really smash and compress and pack that silage to keep the oxygen out. Whenever we do silage and we do a good job of making silage, it can last for several years. It takes about 3 weeks for the ensiling process to complete, and we need to drop that pH level in the feed. And so it takes on average about 3 weeks for that to happen. And once that is achieved, it will stay in that fermented state until we open up the silage and start feeding it to the cows. Okay, I think we'll go look at the final TMR total mix ration here in the manger. So this is the final product. This is called a TMR, a total mix ration. You can see all of the different types of feed that is mixed in here. We have all the different hays, we have the different silages, the different grains with the premix. So with every bite of food, the cow is getting a complete nutritional package. When I was younger, I remember we fed the cows separately. We fed hay at one time and grain at another time. And so the cows really weren't getting a complete nutritional package at any point in time. This is much more scientific and measured, and this has enabled dairy cows to become much more productive. So here we have our total mix ration being fed out to the cows. The big mixer wagon has blades and augers on the inside, so it works just like a blender. And there's a scale as well. So our feeder, he gets the recipe from the nutritionist, and he can add the exact pounds of each different type of feed into the mix. And so depending on where the cow is in her lactation, she needs different nutrients to be able to meet all of the demands that her body has. This ration that's being fed is called our fresh cow ration, and so it's for cows that have just recently had their calves and are giving high amounts of milk. So it's a very dense ration. It has lots of nutrients in it, even more so than at other times in the lactation, because she needs all of that extra dense nutrition. So with every bite of food, she is getting a complete package, a complete nutritional package.
So Wes, we do have a question related to the feed, and that is, do cows get different diets?
Yes, a good question. So cows do get different diets. As I mentioned on our farm, we have 4 distinct rations that the cow will consume within a year of being on our farm. When she just freshens, we have the fresh cow ration. Then she gets moved to the high cow ration. Then we have a far off ration. So it's a cow that is pregnant but not giving milk, but not real close to getting to calving yet. So then she gets moved to the close-up ration. If we were actually to mess up and feed like my fresh cow ration to my close-up cows, that would be a total disaster, because it is such a highly dense ration that the cow would start to gain weight very, very quickly, and it would really mess up her metabolism. I like to tell people that our cows are sort of like athletes. Athletes consume lots of calories every day, but they're burning those calories off. Well, it's the same thing with our cows. Our cows are these sort of Olympic type athletes that need lots and lots of calories. However, at the end of the lactation cycle, when they're not giving very much milk, or if their baby is still pretty small inside, you would never want to feed a cow at the end of her lactation, our fresh cow, our early lactation ration. It's really interesting. I think being a dairy farmer, I will never be bored, because there is so many things that cows can actually consume. Each part of the world, each region of our state, and each region of the country will feed a different ration to their cows, depending on what the local feeds that are available to those cows. We also incorporate other grains that we ship into Arizona. Arizona grows really good alfalfa. We grow great sorghum. Our winter crops are fantastic. Actually, Arizona is really well known for our durum wheat. However, we cannot grow grain corn here in the Phoenix area where I am. There are some parts in southeastern Arizona down by Wilcox. They actually can grow grain corn there, but the majority of the grain corn grown in the United States is grown in our grain belt, if you will, and in the Central Plains and the Midwest. Those are the big grain corn growing regions. So for those reasons, we actually will ship in our corn. Corn actually has a lot of nutrients in it. It's a high energy source, basically. The starch is converted into sugar in the rumen of the cow, and that helps drive her milk production forward.
And so,
So-
Wes, we have a couple questions about your dairy farm specifically. First, and these are coming from third graders at Jack Barnes Elementary. And how many people work on your farm? And do your kids help out on the farm?
Great question. So we have 18 full-time employees on our farm, and my kids, while they're too young to actually really do true work, they do help me around the farm. We go check on the cows a couple of times a day. It's really important to keep a close eye on the cows whenever they're calving. We want to catch any signs of a delivery issue. If the baby calf is not positioned right, maybe it's coming out backwards, or maybe only one leg is presented. The normal way for a baby calf to be born is to the two front legs to come first and then the head to come first. Any other combination is wrong and will need assistance. So my kids come with me to check on the cows. They love seeing the baby calves. They like playing in our commodity area. They always call it the Ninja Warrior course over by our calves, because we have stacks of hay and grain that they like to climb over and jump over, and then I time them as they run across. So we kind of play around the farm, but we're also keeping an eye on all the animals as we are moving around the farm.
And we have a question from Kay and her second graders at Lehigh Elementary. She said, it looks like the cows are throwing some of their food in the video. And what was that about? Why did they do that?
Good question. So we don't like it when the cows throw their food because it can get wasted. But a lot of times what that is, I believe, that day was kind of a sunny day, and so it was probably a little bit warm out, and it gets kind of hot on their backs of the cow. So I think they pick up the feed, they throw it up in the air. It's probably fun, but it also probably feels good when it lands on their backs and protects them from the sun. I think it feels good. So that's my guess as to why they do that. I kind of wish they wouldn't, though, because feed is really expensive, and we don't want to waste any of our cow feed. So I wish I could speak cow so I could tell them to not play with their food.
Well, wonderful. Thanks so much about that. So now that you've seen a little bit about how cows are taken care of and how they're fed, and you've heard a little bit about how dairy farms help to utilize byproducts from other industries, let's do another poll question. And that question is, what % of total U.S. greenhouse gases does dairy farming contribute in the U.S.? And remember that you can post your questions. If you're on Zoom, you can answer, or Facebook, you can answer the poll directly. And if you're on YouTube, you can post your response in the chat box. And dairy was actually the first food product to conduct what's known as a life cycle assessment. And that was to measure greenhouse gases from grass to glass. And that means from the production of the feed for the cows, transporting that feed to the farm, all the greenhouse gases produced on the dairy farm and in the bottling plant, and the transportation of the dairy products to the store. And we do have another question. A couple of people have asked this question, Wes, if you can answer it while people are responding to the tour. And that is, where does your milk go? Is it sold? Do you ever sell milk directly from your farm? Or what brands are your milk sold under?
Okay, good question. So yeah, we are part of a co-op. Most of the dairies in Arizona belong to the United Dairymen of Arizona Co-op, and all of us pool our milk together. We have a milk processing plant in Tempe, which is right outside of Phoenix, and most of our milk actually goes there, but not all of it. Some of our milk will go directly to Daisy Sour Cream, Safeway, Bash's, Fry's, Albertsons. There's lots of the different grocery stores that have their own bottling plants as well. And so our co-op actually coordinates between the dairies and the processing plants where our milk ends up. So any given day, I don't actually know where my milk goes. The transport company takes care of that, and our co-op takes care of that. So I can just focus on making good, clean, high quality milk. I can focus on taking care of my cows, and I don't have to be thinking about, oh, where does this milk need to go, or that load of milk need to go. And so that's why I really enjoy being part of a co-op, because we all work together. We all invest in our plant together. We're all on the same team, if you will. A new really exciting milk plant has just been built here. It's only been going for a month or so. It's called Fairlife. And if you guys want to go check out that new product, it's a very high protein milk product. It has low sugar. So if you guys are like to play sports or want to just watch your overall calorie intake, but want to have high nutritionally dense food, Fairlife milk is a great thing to look at. A really neat part of it is it's actually lactose free. So people with lactose intolerance can drink Fairlife, and our milk is actually going to Fairlife, and a lot of our neighbors out here, because it's built about 20 minutes from us. And so the dairies on the west side of Phoenix, a lot of our milk is ending up at Fairlife right now. So it's kind of the newest exciting thing that has happened in the Arizona dairy industry, and I'm really glad that the plant ended up being near our house, near our home.
And so let's go back to that poll and take a look at what you thought. So you can see the results on the screen, and the answer really is only 2%. And the dairy industry has made a commitment to be net zero by 2050 across the supply chain. So that means they will be producing or sequestering more greenhouse gases than they produce. And you can be assured then that your dairy products are part of the solution to climate issues and certainly not part of the problem. And we have just a few minutes left, and I want to just ask a few more of the questions that have come in. I do want to also mention that if you're in Arizona, you can go to arizonamilk.org, and there is a local dairy products page under local dairy, and you can see where the milk from Arizona dairy farms go. And it takes about 48 hours to get from the dairy farm into your grocery store. So you can also be assured that it is always going to be very fresh. Some of the other questions, one of the questions about this was, do you sell your milk to a manufacturer that produces Greek yogurt? And the answer to that is yes. In Arizona, there is a Greek yogurt company in Casa Grande, and some of the milk from the East Valley dairies and the dairies in Pinal County go to that Greek yogurt plant to make yogurt there. Daisy Sour Cream has a plant in Casa Grande. And another place that Arizona Milk goes is to the Milk and More store to make Arizona Farms cheese and cheese curds. So those are great products that you can get within Arizona. I do have a question from Grace, and I believe these are her third graders. Do the cows ever run away? And what happens if they do?
That's a great question, Grace. So every now and then we will have someone maybe forget to close a gate, and the cows will escape. And so we have to have a big rodeo and try to get the cows back in. So they get all excited and they run around, but normally they stay really close to the farm because they like the feed. So they just stay nearby. Very rarely do they ever get far away, but yeah, we want them to stay where they're supposed to be, which is in our corrals for them. So thankfully that doesn't happen too often.
That sounds like an interesting event happening on the farm. So it seems that our time is just about up. I hope you enjoyed your tour of Kerr Family Dairy. Remember that you can visit arizonamilk.org or nevadamilk.com for nutrition education resources. And feel free to let us know if you have any questions that we didn't get answered today. We will get those out to you. Also, for those of you that registered for today's tour, you'll receive a quick post-tour email or survey through email. And those of you on Zoom will have this survey pop up in your browser when you conclude today's tour as well. If you can take a quick moment to complete that survey, and then that will help us to evaluate and improve our program, and we greatly appreciate it. The link for the continuing education certificate for dietitians and diet technicians will pop up after you submit the survey. Other health professionals can also use this survey for 1 contact hour. So on behalf of Wes and Lauren, our Facebook and YouTube moderators, Pat and Jen, and Dairy Council of Arizona and Nevada, thanks so much for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed this virtual tour, and we hope you have a dairy wonderful day.